The war that began on October the 7th marks day 700. Donald Trump says Israel is losing at least the PR side of that war. And as the IDF continues preparations for a conquest of Gaza City, we bring together two Israeli reservists, one who is continuing to serve and one who now refuses to serve and calls on his fellow soldiers to do the same. It's Unholy. I'm Jonathan Friedland in London.
And I'm Yonit Levy in Tel Aviv. Unholy, two Jews on the news. Lots to talk about, but we should mention that the world has gone back to school and college. And in this country, nothing says back to school more than Houthi missiles being fired at something like 10 a.m. Towards Israel and sirens. All is well, though. But I did want to focus, since I know that in a certain household in London, there are more college students than school attendees, then we will say that I'm actually focusing on my nieces, who are magnificent and are two of them are going to college this year. And I went over, my hobby is to go over the list, that sort of the housing staff offers their checklist of what to bring and what not to bring.
I know that list.
In the list, I know you know it well. The list of not to bring always has these peculiar things. Did you notice that? Like, it has the do not bring a waffle maker, okay, or candles. I get it. They don't want you to burn the house down. Great. And then don't bring fondue pots, and don't bring
was on the list.
Road signs. Like, what happened there? What kind of college student decided that they're going to bring in the sort of huge stop sign from their neighborhood, and someone had to say, no, that's not coming in? Like, how did that come about?
It is odd.
What I'm wondering about.
It's odd partly because that's the kind of thing people would take once they're at college. They would grab on some drunken night a road sign. The favourite in my day was always finding a traffic cone and putting it on the head of one of the many statues that adorned the town where I was at university. I can't claim any responsibility.
Did you actually do that at Oxford, sir?
I can neither confirm nor deny. But no, I am now the parent of, in a way, an American college student, because my younger son is spending the year on an American campus as part of his UK college course. He is going to be what do they call that? A junior year abroad kind of thing. He's doing that. And the other one is no longer a student. So this is a dim memory. And yet, every time it's September, some inner child within me stirs with sort of dread, thinking it's back to school. And, I don't have to buy a pencil case or, a new school uniform anymore. Those days have passed, but somehow it's buried deep in there. I think I may have made this point before on Unholy. I think the Jewish calendar is in sync with human rhythms more than the regular calendar, because Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, is approaching. And of course it is the new year, because in every way it's become very autumnal here in Britain.
Not here,
summer,
in a gazillion degrees in Tel Aviv.
Not where you are at all, but agriculturally, academically, this is obviously the new year. When did somebody come up with this mushagas of January? It's obviously now. So yes, it feels like that, but no longer with getting, bundling kids off to school, which I know is a big part still of the Levy household. So it's very, very, we're in different places, and yet the feeling remains, put it that way.
Indeed. And we shall tell our listeners, remind our listeners, that we will be coming with our fondue pots and stop signs to New York, October 29th, for our Unholy Live at the Stryker Center. So you can get tickets for that already if you look at our show notes. One more important note: Jonathan Friedland's 14th book, The Traitor Circle, Eats Great, is out in the UK September 11th, and it will be out in the US October 28th. Please watch out for that.
And we will be talking about it, I think, on the podcast next week. We'll
be ready for some tough questions, sir, because it's not talking about it. I will interview you about it.
Yes, I'm going to be the special guest. I'm going to be in that chair. You will be grilling me. If I get the arched eyebrow, I know I'm in big trouble. Again, that's another reason to be on YouTube. If you want to see the Yonit eyebrow, you've got to go to YouTube. Yes, The Traitor Circle out next week. And yeah, bracing myself, because it's always an anxious period when a book comes out, as you are going to find out all too soon, Yonit.
But as I said, a lot of news, and you mentioned it's day 700, Israel inching closer to a full-blown operation in Gaza City. I would notice a few things as we kind of look down the barrel of this operation. First of all, Hamas on the ground is preventing Palestinians from leaving Gaza City, which is to say Hamas essentially wants these people to get hurt so as the world will then pressure Israel to stop. Israel has already drafted about 60,000 reservists. We will be talking to two of them in our episode today. I think two very interesting voices as the, internal debate in Israel over this intensified. Israel is definitely a country in which these discussions happen all the time, but now an unpopular war, an unpopular move going into Gaza City, highly criticized by many, including in the defense echelon, and at the same time, the government moving forward with a bill to exempt the ultra-Orthodox. All this together raises questions about calling up for fourth or fifth round reservists to fight. By the way, most of the conscripted army will actually be taking on this fight in Gaza City, but of course, reservists were a big part of this whole war. What I would want to point out, Jonathan, is that it will be a very, very big move by the prime minister to go into this operation in Gaza City when all of the top officials in the defense echelon are all essentially saying to him, don't. They're saying, take a hostage deal and don't go into Gaza City. I think I should make clear that as we speak here on September 4th, I think, and of course reality can prove me wrong in a minute, I'm not sure this is fait accompli. As I said, first of all, Netanyahu has to go against the advice of everyone in his defense echelon. He did that once in Rafah, but the stakes were lower, we must say. And the other thing, it does look like this is still part of a tactic, right? To say to Hamas, this is just about to happen. Here it is, just around the corner, right now. But if you give bigger consents for a hostage deal, we might stop. So I keep thinking of that scene in West Wing, the best television show ever made. Remember when the president says he's going to send aircraft carriers to the Tyson when he's straight, and everyone is saying, but no one ever did that. And he said, "Am I doing it? I just said I will." Right. So that's the difference between the two things. So the chief of staff of the military basically saying everything that he can besides, this is my uniform, here are my keys, and I'm leaving a post and standing down. He's saying he doesn't want to do it, including the fact that he, behind closed doors, reportedly warned that if the military does go into Gaza, the actual significance of that will be martial law in Gaza, which is a bridge too far for many, many Israelis, if that is what will happen as consequence of this operation in Gaza City.
Because suddenly Israel is a sort of full-blown, inch-by-inch occupier running the entire strip. I mean, just on your point before about Hamas urging people to stay, there are both sides are playing tactics here with each other. So just as there are some, a la your point about the West Wing, who think this is a threat by Netanyahu to pressure Hamas to do the deal that Israel wants. Similarly, you can see that there's two ways of reading this Hamas urging of their own people not to leave Gaza City. On the one hand, you could imagine people saying, well, in a way, why would they? Why would they make it easier for Netanyahu to make this move and reconquer Gaza City? It's not their job to make it easier for him and just empty out all the people. On the other way of looking at it is, often Hamas is accused of using civilians as a human shield. What could be a more literal expression of that than this? That Gaza City is where Hamas's remaining commanders are believed to be holed up. And if they are saying, we fear an Israeli onslaught on Gaza City because that will mean we are vulnerable, therefore you, the citizens of Gaza City, we need you to stay, in a way quite literally as a shield between us and the IDF. So there's two ways of reading that. I do find the opposition of Eyal Zamir fascinating because there have been other points. About a decade ago, the Israeli military and others in the security echelon were saying to Prime Minister Netanyahu then, don't bomb Iran, about to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions. And in that particular case, Netanyahu did pull back. It was seen then as impossible, really, to go fully head-to-head against the chief of staff of the military, the entire military establishment. That was a line he couldn't cross. If he now feels he can do that, even over the heads of a new chief of staff, relatively, matter of months, that he himself appointed, who is saying as explicitly as he can, exactly as you said, very evocatively, short of handing in his police badge, don't do this, and he still does it anyway. I think it just it's yet another marker of a point I think I've been making for a while, that this is a very different kind of Netanyahu government. This is not complying with the norms of previous Israeli governments, we know that, but it's not even complying with the norms of previous Netanyahu governments. This is a line-crossing government that just believes it can do this on its own. I do wonder how a military operation really works in the teeth of military opposition. If they don't want to do this, how do they then do it? Do they undermine it from within? Do they say, we're professionals, we'll now execute it to the best of our abilities? Or do they try and show the political bosses, we told you this was unworkable, time to change course? We're entering that kind of territory if this goes ahead, and as you said, it may just be a tactic.
Yes, look, I don't think that Israel is a country in which a military coup is an option, in the sense that the military just says, you know what, you're giving us orders, we're not going to do it. You already see Eyal Zamir saying, okay, we will, there's a difference between what he says behind closed doors and what he says to cameras. And to cameras, he's saying, we're going to fulfill this mission. I think it's important to know that Gaza City still has an immense tunnel system in which, obviously, first of all, Hamas operatives are hiding, and tragically, they are holding hostages for 700 days. So the danger here, and first of all, Eyal Zamir said, if we're going in, we have to go in seriously, because if not, it's a death trap. If soldiers just go above ground and not try and dismantle this tunnel system, then it's going to be a death trap for them. But if you do go down, of course, the danger here, and it is a real danger, is that the hostages themselves might be hurt. Of course, the families are kind of frantic trying to stop this in any way possible. Just to imagine, hostages managing to survive for 700 days. We know there are 20 of those who managed to do that under the most, inhuman conditions, and then something like this happening. So all of that is in play here, including protests, a protest wave in Israel, the families and those who support them saying, stop the war, bring back the hostages, and that is the most urgent thing to do right now.
Yeah. And just on the point of hostages, the great fear is a repeat of the tragic, more than tragic, incident in August 2024 when 6 hostages, we talked obviously with the mother and parents of one of them, Hirsch Goldberg, but who were in the tunnels. The IDF were coming and close, and Hamas murdered them for that reason. And I think part of the IDF's warning is that if you are doing that in Gaza City, you will replicate that set of circumstances and risk the lives of those remaining 20 or so remaining living hostages. As I say, I think the significance of this is it's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in a country like Israel, a small country with national conscription. Can you, go into an operation like this when the public are on the streets and in huge numbers in the polls, 70, 80%, urging an end to the war rather than an escalation, and the military itself, as explicitly as they possibly can, against this operation? Can a government go in and proceed anyway? That is, I think there are not many countries in the world, democratic countries in the world, that would embark on this in those circumstances. It does just show you how Netanyahu feels, in my mind, still beholden to those 2 coalition members who are the ones who will not countenance an end to the war. He is ready to continue with a course of action, even when it means setting his face against both the public and the military. That is quite something in a country like Israel.
It does show you one more thing, and that is just how intransigent Hamas is, just how, sadly I say this, still powerful it is, in a way that it is not blowing a white flag. It's not surrendering. And it's not willing, even now, when it says, yes, you know what, let's go to a partial deal, let's go to a comprehensive deal. It's not even saying the words that Israel needs to hear. Forget Netanyahu. The country needs to hear, which is demilitarized, right? Hamas is stepping down and is demilitarizing this terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst terror attack on civilians per capita in the history of mankind. So that is also something to say. The fact that Hamas is not essentially budging, really. And it is, again, tragically receiving assistance, because if the whole world, or a long list of countries, are saying, you know what, we are going to recognize a Palestinian state, then Hamas is thinking to itself, wait a minute, the pressure is going to be on Israel Israel so severe that we don't have to give even one hostage, and the world is going to force Israel to stop the war. What I'm trying to say by this is it's just a very, very complicated picture, but I'm the incurable optimist here. It's really strange to be the news anchor and be an optimist. But I will say that I do think that now is actually a moment in which, I know we've said this many times before, but now is actually a moment in which when the pressure really is on Hamas. I think they are concerned about what might happen in Gaza City. And Israel is really, putting on all of the stripes of being very serious about this. Perhaps we will see some sort of progress, perhaps.
Yes, we'll see. I mean, you and I will differ on the recognition of Palestinian statehood and that being, helping Hamas. I understand the logic as you explained it. I think that is a snare, a trap that Israel itself set for itself and walked into because of the frustration that Europeans and others feel because they weren't heard and weren't listened to in their opposition before, particularly on the humanitarian aid issue. And I think out of dealing with their own domestic publics, who are demanding they do something, they've reached for this. I think Israel absolutely could have avoided that by giving ground on other areas, most obviously humanitarian aid. So that's a different thing. Talking of international involvement in this, though, I think we should just mention the one ally they have that, for one thing, the one ally actually Netanyahu cares about. He thinks it's the only ally that matters, and that's why he's been able to disregard all those Europeans and others, and that is the United States. Donald Trump, I'm tempted to say repeating, because he has done this before when he was not president and when he was just the candidate, but essentially saying this war needs to stop. Israel is losing the PR battle, he said in an interview with the Daily Caller. I think at the end of last week, saying, look, Israel may be winning the war, but not winning the world of public relations. They're going to have to get that war over with. As I say, in March 2024, he did send a very similar message: finish up your war, you've got to get it done. So again, I wouldn't be holding my breath, because Donald Trump does this thing where he acts as if he's just observing what's going on rather than being the one person in the world who has kind of veto power. I think. I mean, this is debated whether or not he does. My hunch is if he said to Netanyahu, you've got to stop, Netanyahu would stop. If it was a direct and unambiguous instruction. We saw that in the war with Iran, where when he said stop, literally stop, and dropped the F word, the bombers returned back to base. I think he does have that level of leverage, partly because actually Netanyahu has decided to put all his eggs in the Trump basket and everyone else doesn't matter. When you've done that, you can't really alienate your only ally. So Donald Trump making that point is interesting. Does it suggest that they themselves think there's a timeline here similar to optimistic Yonit that thinks, Hamas is about to move? But certainly this statement won't have made Hamas feel more likely to go back to the negotiating table. They'll maybe think, well, we've got some time.
So I'm going to move from optimistic Yonit to trepidatious Yonit, because what I hear in Trump saying, and he went on, he kind of says Israel lost total control of Congress. He said, when I was younger, Israel had more power, and now the once dominant lobby, the AIPAC, has weakened. And, he's attributing this to the progressive left. What I'm worried when I hear all of this, and this kind of, I think, should worry Israelis more than many other things that might happen, is that President Trump likes winners. And if in some way he thinks that Israel is moving from the winning column to the losing column, in whatever category, PR or any other, that would be something that I would be concerned about, really. In all of that, we should also tell our listeners that we will have a separate bonus episode this week discussing all of that, right? The sort of UN recognition and what that means for Israel, for the Palestinians, for Hamas, in our bonus episode.
Yeah, we will. I mean, two notes about the double standards and inconsistency of the political world of journalism, in a way, of all of us when it comes to Trump. Because first, let's just go to his words. He said Israel had the strong in this interview.
Yeah, I knew you were going to pick that up.
Lobby in Congress of anything or body of any company or corporation or state that I've ever seen. They had total control over Congress, and now they don't. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Pat Buchanan referred to Capitol Hill.
First of all, you're old enough to remember Pat Buchanan, and so am I. So let's just pause on that. Okay.
I'm old enough to have covered Pat Buchanan and his campaign and his win in 1996. I was there covering that in New Hampshire. He got into huge trouble when he said that the Capitol Hill was Israeli-occupied territory. What is the difference? Because people thought that was an anti-Semitic trope, suggesting an overmighty Jewish lobby, etc. Here he is saying Israel had the strongest lobby in Congress, more control than any corporational state that I've ever seen. Donald, let me introduce you to the gun lobby. But anyway, they had total control over Congress, and now they don't. He just gets a pass with that, right? The very people, perhaps even on the right, who would have said that's hugely anti-Semitic, would have given him a pass. But Donald Trump also gets a pass from the left. That may sound surprising, but let's recall that Joe Biden, who was urging restraint and telling Israel famously, don't make the mistakes we made after 9/11, the left branded him Genocide Joe. They took to the campuses to protest. Here is Donald Trump, who for 6-7 months has been at Netanyahu's side, who has come up with a plan, the Gaza Riviera plan, we may come on to talk about that, that would empty Gaza of its people. And nobody is calling him Genocide Don or Genocide Trump. The left went after Biden for doing much less than Donald Trump. He gets a pass from the left, just as he gets a pass from, as it were, the kind of, the anti-Semitism invigilators, sometimes on the right, sometimes in the center, for his comments. It's just interesting how Donald Trump is, we think Donald Trump is, attacked always from all sides. He gets away with stuff that people on left and right do not get away with.
Yeah, I think the left is so shocked by other moves that don't have to do with the Middle East that they're quite busy. But I think I should say, Jonathan criticizing the left is one of my favorite Jonathans. Okay, so we...
You speak as if this is a rare thing. Should we just say something about that meeting, though, in the White House and this post-war plan for Gaza, as reported by the Washington Post? We ourselves have not seen it, but the Washington Post said that they have this 38-page prospectus. I mean, there's, we talked on the podcast last week about this meeting. Tony Blair was there, Jared Kushner was there, Steve Witkoff was there. We have to point out, I don't think any Palestinians were there or anyone from Gaza speaking about the future of Gaza, but these men were sitting in the White House talking about the plan for Gaza. According to this Washington Post reporting, 2 million of the population of Gaza would at least temporarily leave through, quotes, voluntary departures to another country or into restricted areas within the territory. So, is there a country that has said, yes, they'll take them? What are we talking about inside the country? Are we talking about, they call them humanitarian transit areas. Everyone else around the world is going to call them camps, and we should get ready for that. And apparently this plan has been concocted by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, fresh from their extraordinary success in distributing aid. The people who brought you that great triumph are now coming up with this plan. Just one last detail that just leapt out at me. Under this plan, anyone who owns land in Gaza would be, in exchange for rights to redevelop their property, so Trump turns it into oceanfront beach resort, in return, they get a digital token. Now, imagine thinking a digital token from Donald Trump is worth anything and surrendering your land. These are people who famously guard and cherish the land, and it is central to their identity. They're going to take it for a digital token and apparently £5,000 in cash if they agree to leave the country. Not a huge amount of money. It is, to my mind, just a revelation or an illustration of how out of touch with, I'm tempted to say, reality, Donald Trump and his war planners apparently are, if that's their plan for Gaza.
The people I spoke to in Washington and both the people I spoke to among the the security echelon here in Israel, no one thinks there is any chance that this is a feasible plan. I don't know if that makes it, that changes anything. I think the fact that the people who are involved with the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, according to reports, are also involved here makes you think for a moment maybe it is, but I really don't think that this is something that will happen. Like all of the parties here are going to have to figure out a plan for the day after in Gaza, which is a reality and which is feasible. If they don't, then we are going to be reliving this for much more than 700 days.
It's something actually several of our guests have made that point, haven't they? That the hugely absent thing is any day after plan or strategy coming from those who are running this war.
Because I think that's a really important point, Jonathan. Look, we talk a lot, and I don't know if our listeners have noticed, you don't approve of the Israeli government and what it's doing. The point is that
not this Israeli government, no, that's quite true.
And this, I think that a lot of people in Israel are saying to themselves, really honestly, trying to have a discussion that is detached from the Netanyahu or not Netanyahu, and saying, wait a minute, but how do we know that Hamas really will never, ever have the power to do this again? Don't we need to continue this war until every last tunnel is dismantled, until every last terrorist has been, in some ways, assassinated? And so there's a question here, and it is a real question I think many Israelis are asking. And I think the answer to that could be that if you look at Lebanon, and there Israel didn't, go after the very last terrorist from Hezbollah, but Israel said, we need an alternative here. We need a structure in which it won't be possible for Hezbollah to ever build back its power again. And the fact that Israel sadly has not taken that road and finding some alternative from the beginning, I think is part of what we are seeing now. We want to say something. I mean, we did, talk about the fact that this is day 700. And just a point about where we are, I think, exhausted is the word that comes to mind. I think of Tony Kushner's masterpiece, Angels in America, in which the ancestors of the protagonist are sitting around the ghosts and saying, the world has gotten so terribly, terribly old. And I think that in a way we have all gotten old and the world is old. And I think that feeling of weariness maybe stems from the fact that we we Israelis feel like we live in a world that kind of doesn't know the difference between good and evil anymore, and doesn't know the difference between, a terror organization that decided to just murder parents and children in their homes by the hundreds, and an Air Force trying to fight a war that terror organization started and throwing bombs that kills civilians. That is a tragedy, of course, but it comes from a different place. And I just wanted to mention, this happened a few weeks ago. I was on vacation, so I can bring something that happened a few weeks ago. The president of the Foreign Press Association, Ian Williams, said on CNN, actually to our good friend, Biana Goladriga, he said that for him, Hamas is like Democrats or Republicans in the U.S. He said in the same breath that he doesn't believe a word Israel says and the IDF doesn't have any compunction. That led me to understand, sadly, that we are living in a world in which some people not only think that Israel is as bad as a terrorist organization, but it is actually worse. And that to me is truly a frightening thing. This is not to say that Israel doesn't need to act morally, doesn't need to look itself in the mirror, doesn't need to ask tough questions. It is to say that there is a world of difference between the two. Even now at day 700, I am very, very adamant about that. So that is just my feeling. And the fact that there are some people who work at trying to obfuscate that is a sad thing.
You're right to say that people have lost sight of so much in these 2 years, and distinctions that should be made are not being made. I think one very relevant distinction was, we were pointed to it by the philosopher Michael Walzer when he was on the podcast and talking about there's the justness of the cause of a war, and then there's the question of the justness of how that war is prosecuted. To my mind, maybe I'm giving the world opinion too much credit, but I think 7th of October, 700 days ago, not everyone, of course, but most people of good, right-thinking people thought that Israel absolutely had a just cause in fighting that war, and they had the kind of clarity you're speaking about of understanding who was in the wrong here and who was in the right after that heinous massacre of October the 7th. In the 2 years since, and I can see why from Israel this looks as if people have just lost their grip of who's in the right and who's in the wrong, the world has come to a conclusion that this war, albeit with a just cause, is not being fought justly. And we've talked about it so much. Central to that, I think, has been the humanitarian aid, and the withholding of it, and all the issues around it. But I also do think just the sheer degree of, I mean, because you say, war is always tragic and people get killed in war. The fact that more ordnance has been dropped on the Gaza Strip than was dropped on Dresden, Hamburg, and London put together in the Second World War does mean people struggle to say, well, it's very clear who's right, who's good and who's evil in this war. People have, even those people who thought that the cause of this war was just, the sheer devastation, the fact that one of the points that the military make about Gaza City is that there's nothing left really to destroy in Gaza. So much has been flattened. I think that it's the conduct of this war that has contributed to this muddying about who represents right and who represents wrong. Because I think some people think the cause of this war was very right, but the fighting of this war, the prosecution of it, has been very wrong. And I don't think that it's only people who have a defective moral compass who think that. I think the conduct of the war itself has invited people to think that over these 700 days.
I'll say two things about that. I'm not talking about people who are asking questions about the way the war is conducted, or indeed what you didn't mention, and I'll help you out here, what the Israeli government is officially saying about its plans, or some ministers in the government, right? I think I'm talking specifically about the people who look at this and say, and are saying, look at, I mean, what is the president of the Foreign Press Association essentially saying when he says Hamas is like Democrats and Republicans, but the IDF has no compunction? He is saying Israel is worse than a terror organization that perpetrated the worst massacre against civilians in the history of mankind. Now, we can go into everything, and indeed we have in the past 2 years, about everything that Israel has been doing and why everything here is still different than thousands of people going into innocent civilians' homes and murdering them with sadistic cruelty and then posting it on social media and then hiding behind their own civilians. So again, we can go extra rounds about this. What I'm talking about is specifically people working to convince you that an incident in Sde Teiman of something that happened, or a suspicion that a prisoner, a Palestinian prisoner, was sexually assaulted is the same as rape being used as a weapon of war on October 7th, right? And the people who are trying to convince you that, for instance, and forgive me, stupid decisions about humanitarian aid are the same as a terror organization starving hostages, civilians for 2 years. That is what I'm talking about. But again, we can go on and on about this. I think at some parts we are agreeing on this point, aren't we? A little bit. I mean, you're also shocked by what he said, no?
Look, absolutely. That interview conducted by our friend Biana and with the head of the Foreign Press Association is a shocker. You've got to watch the video. It is an amazingly absurd thing to say that it's in the context of saying if journalists have a Hamas affiliation, well, there are some journalists who are Democrats and some who are Republicans. If you think that Hamas is like an American political party, then
then we have a villa in North Korea to sell you.
I mean, really, it's a ridiculous thing to say. It misses the reality of what Hamas is, and it misses the reality of what Hamas did on the 7th of October. On that, you and I will emphatically agree.
Crucially, this week, a number of reserve soldiers wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, and to the Chief of Staff saying, we have been serving for a long time and we will not be able to do it again, or continue to do it rather, because we are, and this is the first line of the letter, we think this is a dangerous thing to do for our brothers and sisters who are held in Gaza, the hostages. That's how it starts. This of course reignited the debate about reservists and their part in the war in Gaza.
And for that reason, we wanted to bring that debate here to Unholy, and by bringing onto the podcast two reservists, two people who have served extensively in Gaza, both actually around 260 days. Both define themselves as Zionists. Both say that they are willing to serve again. But one of them says they will not serve again in Gaza. We will hear in a moment from Captain Yotam, who wrote a piece in the New York Times whose headline was, "I fought in Gaza. Here is why I would not go back. It's a very, very powerful piece that went around the world. He says in there, Gaza became a lawless zone with little effective oversight of the military and almost no personal accountability for soldiers. Today, as the government calls on tens of thousands of reservists to participate in the cruel reoccupation of Gaza City, writes Captain Vilk, I implore my fellow soldiers, refuse to report. This is the time to speak. It is your duty. We will hear, as I say, from Captain Vilk directly in a moment. But first, we will speak with someone who has made a very different decision and has served and will continue to serve.
Yuda Lepian, first of all, thank you for coming on Unholy. If we can ask you to tell us your rank, how many days of reserve duty you did, where you're from, and how old you are.
I was born in the Upper West Side. When I was 2, my parents decided to leave Manhattan and to make Aliyah, mamash a modern Lech Lecha. Grew up in a modern Orthodox upbringing, easy, chill, dati light, normal, chill. And I grew up in Jerusalem. Since October 7th, I fought between 240 to 260 days. Mostly Gaza, a bit of Lebanon, in between Kav, and I have to say it's been one of the toughest and one of the most proudest and one of the most challenging things I've did in my life. The last round, I want to be honest and say that I didn't join my unit for 82 days. I came for every few weeks for a bit due to personal issues of my family and also protecting myself and my soul. And but the next time, I'll come whenever they need me, wherever they need me.
We'll also add that on your social media, you define yourself Zionist, IDF reservist, unapologetic Jew, supporting IDF veterans. We should also say you're a community manager with a Peace of Mind program, which supports IDF veterans as they transition into civilian life. Perhaps we'll talk about that, but to just set the stage for our conversation, if we can. Tell us a little bit for people who listening from outside Israel, what does it mean to do reserve duty for 240 or more days?
Honestly, nothing prepares you at the age of 35. And I don't want to think what would happen if I was 18 and 19. Nothing prepares you to war, real war. Even if you think you're Superman and you're competitive and you're gevel. I don't know how to say that in English, but you nothing prepares.
Superhero.
Yeah, nothing
I was going to
prepares
say
you
manly
to.
man, but okay.
There's this crazy dissonance between saying Hineni, I am here, no matter what they need, but then you're going through the border in Gaza and you're petrified. And I going in the first times, I think even till the end, it's petrifying, and it's scary. And it makes you value so many things. The cliches are right. I don't know if you saw Band of Brothers, but I think or maybe 1917, which is one of my favorite movies, you really get the feeling of, so if to answer your question emotionally, it's a roller coaster of high moments, the best of people, of you understand who you are, where you're from, and where you're going. And also, you see, being honest, you see the worst of what men could do in the name of religion, state, ego. It's a crazy, crazy situation. But I also felt, and I think, Yonit, you spoke about it in one of your podcasts, I felt that this is way more than Gaza and Israel. And this is a moment of can we live here or not? I think it was one of your first ones, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a mixed feelings. And there are times that you're so proud. There are times you're very angry, especially about my government, even though I'm pretty centered to the right. There were times that I was ashamed, mamash, ashamed. It's a crazy feeling that some of it I will pay the price till the rest of my life to go through what I went through. On the other hand, there were a lot of moments of light.
The context for this conversation is that there are some of your fellow soldiers who have made the decision that even though they may have served as long as you have, that they can't go back. They're not going to go back. And that they supported the aims of the war at the start. They were proud to serve. but they think this war has to stop. And, some have described what they're seeing as a kind of lawless zone, and that some of what they've seen, not in, they would say the same as you, I think, best of the best, but also worst of the worst. They've seen some terrible things from including behavior on their own side. I'm just interested what you would say to your fellow soldiers who have come, often with a very heavy heart to that conclusion.
One, whoever served those amount of days and was with us, he has the right. I truly believe that. And to be honest and to be, the camaraderie of band of brothers, etc. If every individual decides that this time it's not for him, or he can't come to Lebanon, or he's done, you say goodbye with love and respect, and you thank him, especially if he's a father of 5 or even if he's single. But because it's such a crazy situation and it was so long, it's important for me to be respectful to the people who think different than me. Saying that, when I am being called every time, no matter what, I'm going first of all, I'm going for the people of Israel, up north, south, Yerushalayim, Tel Aviv, Dati, secular, religious. That's what I'm doing. Number one, not my government, not my politicians, my people. And that's number one, why I go. Second is because I believe in democracy. Because I believe that to have a sustainable army where not every individual decides when it's okay, why it's okay, I'll choose this time. He doesn't want the next time. He doesn't think that in Lebanon. Or what would we do if on the second day going into Gaza, there were many soldiers saying, maybe this is too much and there are too many tanks and too many soldiers. You can't have a stable and normal army like that. Even though we're losing faith in our government outside of the army. It's just, there's something also unfair and a bit dangerous when you're starting to spread it to the world, saying we're not coming. If we have guys in our unit saying we're not coming, it's fine. Let's keep it between us.
So you're okay with someone, just generally saying, I just can't do it anymore for whatever reason. And I'm interested because you used also you said there was shame there for me at some point, and I had to save my soul for a moment. So I'm interested in those moments, perhaps that you could share with us when you felt like for you, it's too much, that you need some distance from it.
100%. If someone says to me, it's too much for me, or the wife is starting to send WhatsApps, or the kids are starting to wet in beds, and they're missing their brit or their bar mitzvah, there are situations that it's not unfair is not the right word, but it's let the simple people continue with their lives. You want us for an extreme situation or for Tzav Shmone or when it's really dangerous, okay, but for so long, people want to continue with their life. And if someone says this is too much for me, so give me a hug and thank you, Achi. And for me also, my ability to come to my commander, my unit, my platoon commander, Gonin, and other people and say, I need this time. I need to be more in the background. I'll come. I'll do my best, but there's things that are happening in my house, and there's things inside that I know, thank God, that I just need a bit to take a step back, and people respect it. I think the whole machoistic Israeli, I'm a superhero, like Jonathan, you said before. I think because of this war is changing. I think because of people like Udi Kagan, I'm sure you saw.
We talked about him last week. Yeah.
I think it's okay for an Israeli man to say kasheli.
Yeah.
It's hard for me, and it's okay. And I work for an NGO, Peace of Mind. That's what we do.
So this is different. This is not people who are saying they need time out for their well-being and mental health, which of course everyone understands. This is a political stance, the people that we're focusing on, who are saying that when the country is, in opinion polls, 70-80% saying end this war, when people are, in the words of one refuser who's saying that this is a war waged by nationalist populists who refuse to pay the political price necessary to bring an end to the war, instead demand that we, the soldiers, the hostages, and the Palestinians pay it in blood. They're taking a stand. So that's a different thing. And I think what was in Yonit's question as well was a hint that maybe you do understand some of that when you speak about shame. It suggests that you yourself have seen things that you object to. And so I'm just thinking, when you do see things you object to, and this huge national majority that want an end to the war, what's your view of people who say, okay, if I object to this, then the most effective action I can take is not to be a part of it?
It's not fair, Jonathan. It's not fair. It's bringing in, it's your personal ideology, your world of values. When does it stop and when does it end? Especially in a democracy. I have my platoon commander is a secular kibbutznik. It's probably the finest person I ever met in my life. And his old tank unit is people who live in Efrat and Jerusalem, the semi-religious. It works. And honestly, I know it sounds cliche, it's beautiful because we're all in it together and we put our personal beliefs aside. It's not, I know it sounds a bit childish, but it's just not fair. You know, we could go back to the disengagement in 2005. My sister was an officer there. And I remember saying that for her, I think it's one of the proudest moments to be an officer, a dati, a religious officer in the Israeli army. And then a half a year later, she had to be in charge of parts of the disengagement, and she did it.
We should say disengagement of the settlements that were dismantled in Gaza and Israel. And
Yeah.
of course, the settlement movement, everyone who's sort of right of center objected to that. But there were soldiers who were participating in essentially evacuating the citizens who were living, the Israelis who were living there. I do wonder about this because obviously, again, this is a war that is, not popular in the country. And you say, you can't do that, right? You can't mix politics in military. Israel needs its reserve forces. To what end? I mean, if this lasts for did you ask yourself that kind of question? Like, if this lasts for another 2 years or 3 years, are you in for the long, whatever you're needed in Gaza? I'm not talking specifically about protecting the rest of Israel's borders. And just specifically about right now, the concern of hostage families, of course, is that they're really afraid that if the military enters Gaza City, the hostages might be harmed. Is that something that goes through the mind of I assume goes through your mind when you are in Gaza?
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. All the time. I grew up in a house where, we were taught to put a question mark on everything. I grew up where after Friday night, we have the most left-wing paper and also the most right-wing paper. Haaretz, Makor Rishon. We 11 years I had the opportunity to have Rabbi Sachs, may he rest in peace, as my father's rabbi on his kosher trips. There's always a question mark. And I think most of the people I met know how to speak when they don't like what they see. And I could continue going on protests every Motzei Shabbos.
Yeah.
And I could continue writing against my government and against my leaders, which I don't feel they're being so leaders. But when I'm being called as an Israeli, as a miluimnik, as a soldier, I'm going.
Yeah.
Now, when we're there, I would like to think, and I'm trying to be extremely honest here. Most of the people I fought with, or when we entered Gaza and we met, surprisingly, people we weren't supposed to meet. I said 99% of the people are in my platoon and more are good people in a bad situation. And it's very complicated. When do you put the line? Who puts the line? Who decides the moral aspect of war? How strong do you fight back? I went to funerals of people, of soldiers not in my unit, who are not alive anymore, and אני מבטיח לכם, I promise to you this. Sorry. There are many people who are lying down in Har Herzl now because of trying to do the best, not to kill civilians, to be okay, to do their best. I know people make fun of it around the world. I know people mock it, but there are many, many soldiers who are dead today because of we having commanders and their commanders saying that a good soldier in the IDF protects life and not takes life. Yes, when we need, we attack, but I don't know. Does that make any sense? Most of the times there are situations where you know you could be if there are three guys who are arrested in the Hummer and they're blindfolded and they've been sitting there for a few hours. Me, Yuda, I don't mind going, taking a cup of water and giving it to them. And also most of the people. I don't see weakness in that. I don't know what that individual did 3 months before. I don't know what he's going to do. But for me, I don't know, maybe it sounds funny, but that's me trying to stay normal and good and Jewish and not a crazy Viking who's doing whatever they want. And if we would have done what we want, most of the infantry wouldn't even be there if we want to talk logic. And I do want to say two personal points. I don't think I'll ever do something as meaningful and powerful like protecting my people in the Israeli army. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about those young, brave, beautiful men who won't have the opportunity to live in a world without war. And I do it again because, Yonit, like you said 2 years ago, I think, that we're fighting something way bigger. And for my people here in Israel and also for Jews around the world, and this goes back to the fiddler, I think we will continue with our amazing tenacity to thrive and survive. And the word of our anthem, Hatikva, is that we keep on staying with hope and long live Israel. And I know it's complicated. We're far from being perfect. But most of us are doing our best, and hopefully better days will come soon.
Amen to that.
Thank you, Yehuda, very much indeed. Thank you for speaking with us, and we're grateful.
That was a very powerful conversation with Yuda, and I will be left with those tears in his eyes when he was talking about his friends. He said, who lie in Har Herzl, which means they're buried in the military cemetery in Jerusalem because, he said, they were trying to protect Palestinian civilians. That's something I think that will resonate, hopefully, with our listeners and beyond that. That is Yuda. And we heard the number of days he did reserve duty. And now we want to hear Yotam, who essentially did the same number and says he, calls himself a Zionist and essentially decided, and it is clear when you hear him talk, it is something that he decided with a heavy heart, that politically he cannot continue to serve in this war. And we wanted to hear his rationale as well.
Yotam Vilk is a reserve captain in the IDF. He fought in Gaza for a year. And a few days ago in the New York Times, he published a piece under the headline, "I fought in Gaza. Here is why I would not go back." Yotam, it's very good to have you on Unholy. I just wondered if we could begin with the year of service that you did do, and I know it began in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, 700 days ago. Could you just tell us something about, first of all, what you saw in that year, but also what your frame of mind was as you went into it, given that it was in the immediate wake of October the 7th?
I'm 28. I was born and raised in Jerusalem. I'm a captain, I think. That's like the equivalent to Seren. I did 269 days of reserve service in the first year of the war. On October 9th, we published a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister and the Ministry of Defense that we feel like that we should get a deal, and I was laid off immediately. I think at least in the first call, there wasn't any processing of an understanding of what, I didn't debate or ponder a lot about like what my obligations are, they were very clear to me. Putting aside anything else going on, there are people that I, as an officer in the IDF, even a reserved one, I have obligations towards. And it was very clear to me that I I have to go. No one had any question going out on 7th of October. We knew, like, I think we all had a lot of feelings towards what we understood as happening. I think as we went to war, we did not even know the scale of the massacre, and we didn't even know, like, I think as people we were very disconnected from already things that the Israeli society knew by the media. We like that's not what you're focused on when you're just like we understood we have an obligation to go back. I we didn't wait for getting calls out. Um, the minute we understood there is something in that sort of scale happening in southern Israel. We like I did and a lot of my friends and everyone who could we understood our obligation is to putting aside like any political debate, any understanding of who is the current Israeli government, who are leading us towards this path. Where you put everything aside and you show up and you take your responsibility in defending the people of Israel. Um, and I think that's the same, like as I write, that's the same understanding and responsibilities that I felt until this day, like until at every moment of my decisions after the massacre of 7th of October. And I think that led me for the whole year that we were serving in Gaza.
So you did 269 days of reserve duty, which I think perhaps our listeners, it would be helpful to kind of explain what that does to your life, to your workplace. That is a big sacrifice to make. And also to ask you in the same breath, like, what changed for you? Because you decided not to go back. So what happened?
There's a price paid. There are a lot of prices paid on maintaining a war for such a long time. We I think again under the same populist regime that Israel has, there's like a mindset of not understanding that war has prices and like people pay them and our power is limited by all sorts of things, and one of them is also like understanding our civilians' life as meaningful. As something that like, and as civilian, I mean like also me, like people who were taken away from their lives, to a war that currently, that was actually, it seems like if it depends on the Israeli government, it will never end. So what I did for 1 year until I was laid off, would be done for, like who knows how long of a time by, it will just be permanentized by like in a form of occupation, in a form of humanitarian city or anything else. And yeah, that takes you away from your life. I hear a lot of my friends say, I'm lucky enough to be single and to be like I was partnered at the time, but like I'm single and I'm like I was sort of still a student in my internship. Like people at least at the beginning were so understanding about like we all were focused on holding on the horrible events, on we're going to a war that we did not choose. But as the war goes along, as we have less justifications for it, less understanding for it, most of the people in Israel are probably opposing at this point, not serving obviously, but like the war going on, we don't have the same understanding. I know, like I see people that are still going for these amount of days where their families are falling apart. A lot of them think about like ponder if even like living here is worth like the price that I pay. Something about your agency on your own life becomes veil, or becomes like it just like you don't have agency on your own life. Your life means nothing because you're just a tool for a war that has no, that was never even had even a sense of being, led in responsibility, being with this understanding about the prices that we pay. And with a lot of cynical use in Israeli soldiers, to sell all sort of political propaganda, which was not what we were told in the beginning. That's the goals of this war are, and you could see, like you see in Israel how people feel lives became just less worthy.
You served first as a tank platoon commander, then as the deputy to your company commander. You were absolutely centrally involved. You led ground maneuvers in the Gaza Strip. You write that you took Hamas strongholds and helped dismantle the grouped tunnels, weapons depots, command posts, and that you were seeing death and destruction at very close range. Then over time, you write that you felt that our own state had lost its way. It was a war waged by nationalist populist leaders, nationalist populists who refused to pay the political price necessary to make the decisions to bring an end to the war, and instead demanded that we, the soldiers, the hostages, and the Palestinians pay it in blood. And finally, Gaza became a lawless zone with little effective oversight of the military and almost no personal accountability for soldiers. Can you just flesh out what led you to that conclusion, particularly this point about little effective oversight? You were there, you had senior responsibilities. What were you seeing?
No one has to tell me how complicated war is, and no one has to tell me, making these decisions every day, every hour, concerning people's lives, concerning your own lives, your responsibility towards your soldiers. You have to make these decisions all the time. We are fighting a cruel terror organization who uses civilian facilities as places of war. Like you don't have to, like, no one has to tell me that. But under a state of war, we don't have the same sense of criminalization that we have. We don't have the sense of a legal system in the way that we even have, like, under, like, actual occupation on, and as we see in the West Bank, like, you have some sense of state, some sense of law. You have some sense, at least I would say, prior to what this government is always also trying to do in the West Bank, but that's, like, also part of the same problem, where we're trying to take out any legal building and any legal accountability measures about actions taking place by soldiers. You could say in the West Bank also by extreme settlers, and this, like, that undermines. That's what I'm saying. That undermines the basic idea of a state. And the minute I say you could justify, under the state of war, we don't have the same idea of criminalization. That happens everywhere. Like, it's not new to Israel. Like, that's how war looks like anywhere else. Like, that's, of course, you don't have the same ways to check and to criminalize. You don't have courts, and you make decisions on people's lives on ground and at every particular moment. And I would say at some point you cannot justify that to such a long period of time, an endless maybe period of time. You say you don't want to, you're not, it sort of became more similar to a brutal occupation or a more harsh one than the one going on the West Bank, but you still have the justification of, like, we are in war, like, these are decisions we have to make, and you give those decisions to a group of mostly young men, Israeli men, between the ages of 18 and 32, and they make these decisions on ground, again, without any legal system, without any idea of legal accountability. And then I would say, like, that just in itself makes a place to be a lawless, like, sort of a lawless land. You could see, like, we see at, the peaks of them, we could see that when we'll speak about what's going on and what happened on the Eat centers. You could see that, like, well, when sometimes Israeli hostages were shot or civilians, like, as you could see that in specific places that we could see it on media. But generally, the ideas that we have on normal time do not imply on war. But when a war becomes a permanent state, that it's publicly speaking as by the Israeli government as a goal for itself, as a permanent state. I don't know if you could hold that same justification for so long without dismantling any idea of a modern state.
I have to ask you, Yotam, first of all, one of the correspondents of Channel 1, Loyanovsky, was saying, going to his fifth reserve duty cycle, and he tried to explain why he was doing this. And he said, among other things, he said, the state of Israel cannot exist without a functioning reserve force. October 7th proved that you can't rely on 600 soldiers on the fence over the holidays, the Lebanon border, the Syria border, Gaza, also the Eastern Front. It means you need a lot of regular soldiers and a lot of reservists. There is no alternative, which is why we cannot abandon the reserve system. I wonder what you think about that, if this for you is just relevant to the war in Gaza, or you are done with what you're, is that a general feeling? And when you think of the critique that was elevated against the reservists from the Air Force before October 7th, right, and after, right, that they, because they were threatening not to serve because of the judicial overhaul, that is what weakened Israel, because Israel's enemies saw that the reserve forces are saying we're not showing up. What do you think of all that kind of critique against, obviously, maybe what you were doing, but what others might be thinking?
Okay, I'll go from your last question back. So first of all, we're not speaking about like a general objection to serve under an unlegitimate government. We all know we're led by populist, nationalist, unworthy and incapable government for a long time now. We knew that for most of the war. We knew that prior to October 7th. Like, that's not the story. I'm speaking about specific actions currently taking place under the Israeli policy that are very public at this point, very clear, that I think that are unmoral, but also illegal. I'm not done with my service in the IDF. I'm fighting for for the IDF, for the state of Israel, for the ability of Israel to continue and exist in the way that we understand it now. And I would also say, like, I did not oppose before, like I did not oppose because the judicial overthrow, like that's not my story. But at some level, they were right by understanding that being led by undemocratic leaders into a war brought Israel to the state that it's in. Like, in that understanding of letting an undemocratic government lead a state into a war, that brought Israel also to probably to 7th of October, but also to what's going on today, where Israel is becoming a more and more unlegitimate state, farther away from any Western understanding of a state that we were part of. And I would say, and for your question, I speak a lot with Zionists in Israel and outside Israel, and people are terrified by the understanding that the way we are the path we are taking today under is the current Israeli government is a bigger threat to the state of Israel than any threat currently holding. Like, Hamas got a bigger strike than Hezbollah did. There is no existential threat currently on the state of Israel. We know how to deal with it. Israel had at least a lot of leverage to work with, if it wanted to work with. I have several ideas how not to fund terror organizations, to encourage terror in the Middle East because you don't want to get peace. Like, I could, if anyone wants my advice in the Israeli government, I'll happy to give it. But at this point, in my understanding, the path we are taking by taking control over Gaza to make another much harder occupation than the one we already have, and especially if we try to forcibly immigrate Palestinians, because voluntary immigration is not a thing, like, anywhere. It means nothing, which is a definitely violation of Israel's humanitarian obligations under the Genocide Convention. And if we let them settle in Gaza on these wrecks, on the bodies of the Israeli hostages, and on the bodies of thousands of more Palestinians, that will put the basic idea of the state of Israel as something that even at this point, I think working our way out of where we got is already so complicated. But the only way we can is to differentiate very clearly between our right to defend ourselves. Like, I took part in that. Israel has a right and an obligation to defend itself. And of course, I understand we have terror organization who wants to kill us. Like, I was fighting back. Like, you don't know what to tell me. But at this point, there is no bigger threat on the state of Israel than the current Israeli government leading us into a deep, deep hole that no one of us knows how to get out of. And we already see, like, the way that's input in the West Bank. And this would be in times more harder, in times harsher. And I don't know if we will not differentiate as soldiers, as Zionists who care about this country, if we do not differentiate between our legitimate actions in Gaza under a war that we didn't start, and between what we are being pushed through by messianic, populist, nationalist government to do in Gaza, does not connect, even the head of chief staff does not connect to Israel's needs or security or right to defend itself. That would put Israel in a place where this whole thing just became unlegitimate. And also our idea of Israel on the day after, I really do not know how it would look like. So my obligation as an Israeli soldier, as a Zionist, is to make that differentiation. And I also hear so much from people in the mainstream of Israel, prior ministers from the past. I hear from so many people around the world. I hear from correspondents everywhere, and from hostages' families about their understanding that what we are doing currently is the only way for Israel to move forward.
Yotam, thank you very, very much for giving us this time and
Thank you.
giving us those very powerfully articulated views. We're very, very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Yotam.
Very, very powerful again from Yotam Wilk. And really, this debate has raged for some time among those who have served. They are comrades. They have worn the uniform and will wear the uniform again. They've been debating this with each other, and I think it's very, very valuable that we've brought that debate here to Unholy and to our listeners. And I know there were people who said that they are torn in their own heads between these two positions. And I'm not sure that they won't remain torn, because they will find themselves pulled, including emotionally, by the case both of these two men have made with us today.
Agreed. So, a word, sir? Can I go first? Can I go first? I have my chutzpah of the week, you might have guessed. Now, this pains me because I have nothing specific against the man who I chose as a chutzpah award recipient, and I'm not sure he has anything against Israel or Israelis, but this was the situation. I'll just describe it briefly, and then if you need, I'll explain why he's the chutzpah award recipient of the week, in my opinion. This is a concert, Coldplay concert. We've been talking about these recently, too much, and this is a completely different context in London, in which Chris Martin randomly invites two young women on stage. He asks them where they're from, what their names are, and they say Israel. There's jeering from the audience. And then he goes on to say, I'm very grateful that you're here as humans, and I'm treating you as equal humans on earth, regardless of where you come from. And then he continues, maybe this is controversial. I want to welcome people in the audience from Palestine. The fact that you need to recognize Israelis as humans, we're all kind of mortified to discover we might not be. So, just don't do that. I guess I get why. And it's a very sad thing in the background of him trying to be either over politically correct or feeling bad because the audience is booing them and trying to make them feel better. But this didn't come out very well. So that is why I, will choose him for this.
So yeah, that's your nominee. I think his heart was probably in the right place, but it didn't.
Yeah, that was why the preamble was pretty long.
No, you did. You said that, and but it did. Perhaps it didn't quite work out as he had hoped. I think, and perhaps a more straightforward nomination comes my way from the revelation from the Boston Globe on Tuesday that the very lawyer for the Justice Department of the United States, who is fighting Harvard University over alleged complicity in campus anti-Semitism, has a couple of questions to answer himself. It turns out that when he was himself a student at Harvard back in 2011, he was assigned to write, he was a classics student, he was assigned to write a brief paper in Latin from the perspective of a controversial historical figure. He chose, normally people apparently choose, Nero or, Theseus. He decides Adolf Hitler will be his figure. As fellow students point out, nobody thinks Adolf Hitler's controversial. There's sort of a consensus on him. Nevertheless, he writes it from the perspective of Adolf Hitler. I tried to bring my fairest mind to this and thought, well, maybe it's just a sort of intellectual exercise. Obviously, he's against Hitler. No, apparently, people who read the paper, including the the professor, regarded it as disturbing, and he was required to do it again. Again, you might be tempted to say the instructor was dismayed, apparently. You might be tempted to say, well, look, it was just intellectual inquiry. The trouble is, 18 months later, when he was getting ready to matriculate from Harvard Law School, he then told a peer that his favorite book that he'd read that year was one Mein Kampf, which he said, he mused, is it bad that my favorite class at Harvard was Nietzsche and my favorite book that I've read this year is Mein Kampf? He went on to praise Hitler as an orator and so on. I think, we are used now to some degree of hypocrisy from people in the Trump administration, but to be the guy who is going to into court to accuse Harvard University of indifference towards anti-Semitism, when you yourself are on the record expressing your admiration for Adolf Hitler and Mein Kampf, it's a little bit awkward, and I think it counts as a chutzpah to be dishing it out to Harvard when you're the guy who's a big, cheerleader, to use that campus term, for the Führer. Bit awkward. A chutzpah award for Michael Velchik.
The Onion headline writes itself, right? Man suing Harvard for anti-Semitism admires Mein Kampf. Yep,
That's
okay.
right. Exactly. So we've done our chutzpah nominations. I think you owe us, to cheer us up, a Mensch nominee.
I really do. And I think that this story cheered up not only me, but all Israelis this week. And that is Israel that stuns and does really well in Eurobasket 2025. It defeated France first in Poland, Katowice, by the way, which is where my family is from. But anyway, they were also booed in the audience, which was really unpleasant and goes, in the vein of what we were talking about, throughout this episode, actually. But then they went on to defeat France and then to defeat Belgium. And, this is pretty much, I think this didn't happen in a decade, them moving so forward in this tournament. So it's a good thing. And it made Israelis very happy this week. So I think that the Israeli national basketball team deserve the Mensch Award of the week.
A worthy nomination in our Mensch category. A couple of things to flag up once again. As you heard, we have done a bonus episode. If you are a subscriber to the podcast, you will be able to hear us take a deeper dive into all the build-up to the UN General Assembly that is imminent, all about recognition of Palestinian state, annexation, all the stuff that's going on there. That's a bonus episode if you're a subscriber. Reminder again that we are live in person in October on the 29th at the Stryker Center. 29th of October, is that the right date? We'll have all the details of how you can book a place if you're in New York in our show notes.
Missed the YouTube. We're on YouTube if you want to see me laughing at Jonathan's jokes. Not only hearing it, it happens a lot. And we will say our big thank yous to Michal Porat, and we'll meet next week.